Welcome to the Accelerating Operational Performance podcast. It's Greg Schinkel again, and I've got a member of my faculty here who I think you're really going to enjoy our conversation together. Now, we always like to feature something in the podcast, just something to keep you thinking about how to make your organization or help your organization become even better. And we've got a new plant manager excellence program. And if you have a plant manager who would benefit from it, please reach out to us at our website, uniquedevelopment.com. And now, when we talk about today's guest, Kandis Neth, Kandis is a member of our unique training and development faculty. I've had the pleasure of working with Kandis even as recently as a week ago when we were kicking off a major, what will probably be our largest project in Canada. And we do business both in the US and Canada, but this is our largest potential Canadian project. And so I want to introduce Kandis to you, and then we're going to have a great conversation about the way that she engages with a lot of the frontline learners who we have the pleasure of working with. So today I'm joined by Kandis Neth, who is a professional engineer and also has her master's in education. Kandis began her career in engineering, but she promises not to make this conversation too technical. Now, through her company, R3K Consulting, she blends engineering thinking, leadership insight, and adult learning to help organizations grow their people, their teams, and strategies in practical, meaningful ways. She's deeply passionate about coaching, continuous learning, and creating the kind of space where people can truly unlock their potential. When she's not facilitating or designing learning experiences, you're going to find her outside with her family, powered by nature and chocolate. Welcome to the podcast, Kandis.
Thank you, Greg. It's wonderful to be here.
Yeah, and if anyone needs to reach out to Kandis, you can find her at her website, which is r3kconsulting.ca. That's r3kconsulting.ca. So, Kandis, one thing that struck me is, and just to set the stage for this, people should know that I was forced to hire you under some duress.
Don't you think?
I am joking a bit, but you're one of the rare people who a client of ours recommended, almost said, "Hey, I think you should have this person teach the course that you're delivering to us." It's a very weird situation, and of course, like most things, when people tell you to do something, there's part of you that resists it. But then I met you, and then I saw you in action, and I saw how well you lead a classroom of adult learners and how much you help them with the light bulb going on. And it's just another example of a member of our team who teaches the content better than I could have ever imagined. So it's just a distinct pleasure to kick off the course with you last week. So I wondered if you could share with our audience about your journey to being really a full-time adult learning practitioner.
Yeah, if you would have asked me over a decade ago if this was going to be my career path, I would have laughed at you. I would have been like, what? I often describe myself as a human engineer. Engineering is really deeply part of my identity. But my story began much earlier than that. I grew up in a trades family. My dad was a sheet metal journeyman. He didn't grow his business. It was just a small family business. So if he wasn't working, he wasn't getting paid. And so I really started to see the work ethic that went into that lifestyle. As soon as I could walk, I was a gopher. I was fetching tools, watching how work got done, and learning just that strong work ethic, being in that environment, but always surrounded by a very male-dominated environment. I have two brothers. They followed in my dad's footsteps, became sheet metal journeymen themselves. But I was encouraged to choose a different path. They were like, "Oh, you like reading books, you're book smart," back in the day. And so I went into engineering, the first of my family to go into university. And engineering was a great experience. It trained me to believe that if you design a system well, it should work. And if it doesn't, you redesign the system rather than blame the people in it. And, having very competent people in a room together, you think, wow, everything should be successful. But it really doesn't work that way in real life. There's lots of things that go wrong with time, budget, schedule, scope creep, those types of things. So in my 20s, I was volunteering with the Edmonton Police Service with Victim Services Unit. I got trained eventually as their crisis intervention, advanced crisis training coordinator, and a volunteer medical emergency responder on the side, kind of satisfying all these different interests that I had. And those experiences really taught me how powerful communication and presence and staying regulated under pressure, like, really are important.
Yeah.
You know, and that complexity of life, that you know, best laid plans get derailed and are often just the result of not the people but the environments that we're in.
I think, by the way,
So
I know that there's more to your story, but I just want to jump in and say that that exposure
that,
early on to blue collar sort of
yeah,
business and the gritty reality of it, it's sort of like I was on a call today with someone that we're coaching, and he grew up as a farm kid, and sort of your story is sort of
yeah,
adjacent to what it is to grow up as a farm kid because you learned the
yeah,
value of hard work. I see that that actually helps you relate to a lot of our blue collar audiences too, because you don't, even though you've got these advanced degrees and designations, you don't ever, it doesn't ever feel like you consider yourself to be above anyone else, which I think is great. And it's not something everyone masters. So then you go into engineering, you're doing some work in health and safety or first aid type training and
yeah.
advisory. And when did you then start to go, okay, I'm gonna go get my master's in education and then even start designing training programs and delivering them in a wide variety of topics?
Well, it happened in two phases. I was noticing, you know, incredibly capable and competent women that I was surrounded with,
Yeah.
just not accelerating their career paths in the way that I thought they should.
Hmm.
And I started to get curious, you know, and I was noticing how some of the communication skills that I learned in the pursuit of kind of giving back through emergency and crisis environments were helping me be more effective in my professional ones.
Yeah.
So it raised a big question for me, like, where do we actually learn these skills
Yeah.
that matter most, matter beyond the degrees and the credentials? And it's really that human interaction and connection. So it was that curiosity, Greg, that really pulled me into learning more about myself and leadership development, and eventually the, you know, kind of the geek side of me, the neuroscience of communication and behavior. So
Yeah.
it all kind of came clashing together in a really interesting way. And then I became a mom.
Yeah.
To be completely honest, it was becoming a mom that I decided that I wanted to have control of my own schedule, to be able to raise my three kids, to be able to have summers mostly off with them, but still work. You know, I was sucked into the glamour of you can have it all and do it all. But I've realized since that you can, but maybe just not all at
Right.
once.
Yeah.
So
Good point.
um, yeah, so that's how I kind of ended up pursuing this and opened my own business, like you'd said in my intro. So
Yeah, yeah. No, and you're busy. I mean, we're lucky to get some of your time to help us with our projects, so that's awesome. I wonder, Candace, you know that everyone in their career journey probably, for a little while at least, they're in a bit of a fake it till you make it mode, or even if they are good at something, they really don't know that they're good at it yet. They're kind of self-doubting. I just wondered for you, what's something that happened earlier in your career where the light bulb went on that, I got this. I think I've got something going on here, as opposed to worrying whether you were doing a good job or not.
oh yeah, you know, that's an interesting question. And for me, when I look back, it wasn't really a big milestone or event. It was something quieter. I really started to have other professionals like yourselves, facilitators, trainers, you know, once I was in this world, um, asking me if I could help them with their
Hmm.
programs, if I could facilitate with them, or, you know, help them design their learning assets. At first, I don't know if this imposter syndrome really goes away, but
Yeah,
my reaction was, well, why do you want me? Isn't this what everybody else does? Like,
yeah,
what am I bringing? I don't have anything magic or special. But those conversations really made me realize that I had a lot in my environment, in my background, that I took for granted. I am able to create engaging learning environments for adult learners. I know how to pace training and learning so people can actually process, and how to design sessions where participants do the thinking rather than me. You know, I didn't realize that that wasn't common knowledge, because if you look, we grew up in a system where it's kind of sit down, shut up. eyes up to the front and listen and try to take that all in. And we know from research that that's just not how learning works, especially with adults. So it was click. That's when it really clicked for me
Okay.
that I wasn't just delivering workshops. I kind of had developed this philosophy, through trial and error sometimes too, about how adults learn best, and people were noticing that, which gave me the confidence to kind of take that on and go, yeah, you know what, I am actually not bad
I'm
at
pretty
this.
good. Yeah,
And
I'm pretty good
part
at
of
it.
the
Yeah.
mindset, part of my mindset shift was really, um, you know, not thinking of myself as a trainer or as an instructor, but
Hmm.
truly as a facilitator. That is what I do. That
Yeah.
is what I love.
Yeah.
And it's that guide on the side philosophy is like, how can I open the doors for them to be able
Yeah.
to understand what we're talking about and making it meaningful for them. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
been a journey, and I still have the imposter syndrome all the time, especially when you came the very first time to you've been voluntold to have this person, and now here I am, right?
That's right. No, I would agree. You know what? Well, we could probably do the rest of the podcast on imposter syndrome. I actually worry that it's a misappropriated label anyway. I think that
Mm-mm.
if you're conscious of your craft and you want to do better at it, you're always thinking about what else could I do to be even better at this than I am already. But again,
Yeah.
I just and you actually bring something up, which we use the word magic or almost like the black box where you can't quite figure out
Yeah.
like what it is. And you know,
Yeah.
we're blessed as a company of having a lot of different really capable instructors, and they're not actually the same. They're actually distinctly different, and so. But there is just something around the human dynamic, emotional intelligence, the technique
Yeah.
itself, and I think I remember a company, Candice, that said, "Oh, could you license our HR managers to deliver your content?" And I said, "Sure, I could." There was like 50 plants, and therefore 50 plant managers or 50 HR people at these different plants. And I go, "Let me ask you, which HR, how many HR managers would you have sit through, or would you sit through a 3-day program of them teaching you?" And they said, "Well, maybe 3." And I said, "Well, there you go." So this is, by the way, no knock on HR managers, but if you're in training and you watch somebody teach from slides and read slides and just kind of
Yeah.
go through a system, that is one method of training people. It's just not the best. And then when you watch somebody who engages you with stories and examples and trusts the learner in their discovery process as you do, it is quite impressive. So let me ask you, on the flip side of the success, I mean, I know I've definitely had either situations that didn't go as well as I thought, or maybe I just call it an outright bomb. I just didn't know whether, had you ever learned from something that didn't go as well? And what lesson did you take out of that?
Oh my gosh, we could do a whole
Yeah.
podcast on the situations that I found myself in that, didn't go well. But um wow, that's hard. I think at the beginning, when I reflect back on my career trajectory, I was genuinely like, I'm a little bit of a geek. I love
Yeah.
information, I love learning, I love sharing knowledge, and I was excited to share everything that I discovered.
Hmm.
And I thought my job was just to teach well and make sure I covered like all of the depth of the content. And what I learned sometimes the hard way is that people don't need the depth. They really need to trust that the information is solid, that it might work for them if they try it, and most importantly, how to apply it. And so I had sessions early on that just felt rushed or overloaded, and the learning didn't really seem to stick. I don't get to see and you do, like, often we don't get to see the results
Right.
of the seeds that we planted. But some of the participant feedback, saying it felt rushed, it felt too much, like I don't know how to apply it, leaving those sessions, it was I realized it was a design issue and a philosophy. So I'm kind of the philosophy that we're in this age where information is at our fingertips. So I started asking myself, what can I provide by bringing people together that they can't just Google themselves?
Right.
You'll hear me
Right.
say that in my session.
Yeah.
And the answer then became connection, practice, perspective, and just enough content that help people reflect on their current approach and maybe plant a seed. So I kind of forgot about my formal training and the models like Kolb's learning cycle that adults just don't learn by hearing more.
Yeah.
And I experienced that with the feedback that they were giving me. And so I've crafted ways that sometimes at first it felt weird because you are sometimes a subject matter expert in the room and you just
Right.
want to share all of these nuggets of wisdom, but they learn by experiencing and reflecting and trying. And when I just kind of released that, it was very fascinating that people ended up getting more out of the sessions when sometimes I told them less. And that was a realization, which again, I apologize to all those folks that had me early in my career that, listened to the slides and slides of content.
No
But
refunds,
who
everybody.
models
No
this?
refunds. No refunds for those things early
Right.
on. By the way, Candice, I did want to say that I've been doing this now for 33 years. So it's really the thing I started doing
Yeah.
out of university way back in the day.
Wow.
And I will say that I still have that challenge, especially after 3 decades, as I've accumulated so many stories and
Yes.
examples that I feel like you got to hear all the good stories and examples until you realize that the only story that probably really matters to them is the one that they're formulating in their own mind based on their own
Yes.
reflections, right? So that's a really
Yeah.
cool. By the way, we're talking with Kandis Neth, and her website is r3kconsulting.ca. She is one of our instructors here at Unique Training and Development, and she also does her own design work and delivery work for other seminar and learning talent development companies. So what is, I mean, you've kind of revealed it through a bit of that story. What is your philosophy about, you did just speak to how you've been evolving as an instructor. I wasn't sure if there's anything else you want to share about your philosophy of how you lead a workshop or what your thinking was. By the way,
Yeah.
just one little tip before you answer is we've got Candice working on this really big project with us. And, eventually, should it roll out as we expect it to, we'll probably be training several hundred people through the program. And Candice even just like put a little page number reference in the left corner of the slide because she said, as you're sitting through a workshop and you hear the instructor talk about a piece of content, but you kind of maybe lost track of, where we are. I think the joke is that it's not that people check out of the training every once in a while, it's that they check into the training every once in a while. And there's always this moment like, oh crap, what page are we on? She's saying something interesting. And so Candice just put the page number in the corner. Now, I know if you're a practitioner, you're going, Greg, that is so basic stuff. Yeah, but we don't do it all the time. And then we send the learner on these little panicky anxiety moments like, where is that in the workbook? I don't want to feel stupid because I don't know where we are. And so, but I know that's a very basic thing, but I'm just wondering, what else do you consider to be some of your tenets when you're designing training and delivering it to make it have the maximum receptibility, have the person receive it well?
Right on. Those little things are powerful because as a facilitator of learning with adults in a room together, really our philosophy is making it feel like a thinking space, not an information space. So anything that practitioners in this space can do to ease the load and the cognitive load of learning, so that they can actually be there fully present and experience. Like you said, you want to avoid, shame, blame, embarrassment at any cost. But really just, I'm really deeply drawn to creating meaningful adult learning environments. They include reflection and discussion and cognitive breathing room, right? The brain can't just integrate the learning like that. It has to have some time to process. So really, given the right conditions, the right time, with the right people, exploring the right topics, it can be profoundly meaningful. And I really do trust that process. And if you're thinking of yourself as the subject matter expert and like the instructor or the trainer that I must tell them all of these things, you're missing out on a big piece of how adults learn and how they can learn and benefit from your guidance as a facilitator. So,
yeah, I mean, that's good tips for anybody, even in a corporate environment, who has to deliver a presentation that they need people to,
yes.
Absorb and change their behaviors and things like that.
Yes.
The way that you describe it as sort of you're trying to remove the negative cognitive load so that you can make room for the positive cognitive load, which is the learning itself. And I think that's a really cool and novel thing because I don't hear a lot of people talk about. You don't want to make it hard for them to learn. You need to make it easier for them to learn because learning itself is hard enough to begin with.
Right. Yeah. Well, and often it's easy to learn new things, but what we're doing in this training, and that I've had the pleasure of seeing how your courses are put together and benefit the frontline learners, is we're actually looking for behavior change.
Yeah.
And that is very different than just trying to regurgitate information that they know it. We want them to do it and apply it and see the benefit and impact from it. So there's definitely a different philosophy from what we've experienced growing up through school, where it was really just information exchange.
Yeah, it's funny because, usually the line I use to try to get a laugh early on in the course, I said, good news, there is no written exam. There is no oral exam. I'm not going to, interrogate you. And most importantly, there's no physical exam, right? Which is what really makes people feel at ease. But you're right, is now that we're talking about it, it's one thing to learn a concept, but when you have to think about how you're going to actually put it into action, not only are you overcoming the learning hurdle, now you're overcoming the habit change and behavior hurdle. Yeah. And so that's even more important why that classroom experience really has to help you feel confident that you are going to go out and try it. Because I think we've all been through, or we've watched a video, or we've seen something, go, that looks really amazing, but there's no way I could ever try that or do that. And that's what we're trying to overcome in the classroom. What do you see?
Unlearning is so much harder. Sorry.
Yeah. What do you see? And this might continue your answer there. But when you look at the difference between a talent development project that goes like really well versus one that was still okay, like it still technically checked the necessary boxes, but it didn't maybe impact as much. Do you have any observations about projects that have gone better than ones that haven't?
Yeah, for sure. There's a couple of observations that I have around that. One thing that I came to realize is facilitation is just a moment in time. I like to sometimes think that I'm going to be the best thing they've ever experienced, but it's just the start of someone's learning journey. It might land in the middle of it, or maybe, it's not the only thing that they really need for skill development and behavior change. So the projects that go well that I've noticed, and actually it's interesting that it kind of ties back to even my thesis research that I did in my master's, is that there always has to be leader involvement after the session, and hopefully before as well, to kind of get people to understand why they're giving it to the people in the team in the first place. What problem are they trying to solve? The ones that I find that are just okay tend to treat training as a standalone event, and that's not what it is. We know that learning from science and memory studies that if new knowledge isn't used quickly, it fades fast, and I mean really fast. This was shocking to me. People can forget up to 50% of new information within an hour, Greg.
Yeah. I'm well aware of Ebbinghouse's forgetting curve. Yeah. It's funny though that it's not just in training. It could be any other information. But you raised a good point. Yeah, you raised a good point, which is the best. If you're going to try, especially if you're trying to transfer behavior, or some clients even have more ambition, like they want to transform culture, which is really the ongoing residue of behaviors, which are the ongoing residue of beliefs. I'm using the word residue, but I mean like it's sort of like this trailing effect of these things. So many leaders, it's funny, Candice, I'm onboarding a new coaching client that I don't do a lot of them myself, but I'm doing one myself. And I was in the meeting with the managers of the person that they want me to help, get better. And they gave me this laundry list of things. And I said, have you gone over that list with the individual? And the answer was no. And I went, well, so do you want me to go over this list with them and surprise them with this feedback that maybe they didn't know? And he's like, yeah. And I go, well, first of all, I don't believe that anything should really be triangulated. So you wouldn't necessarily have me tell them something that you wouldn't tell. And then to their credit, they actually had the conversation, which was great. And then I met with the person and they had greater levels of self-awareness. But to your point is, if a manager of a person going to a training program, instead of just, hey, enjoy that program, just said, hey, I noticed that you're going through it. Let's look at the curriculum. This is the area that I'd love you to focus on. Anything that they could do that reinforces that learner's motivation so that the learner isn't basically burdened with the self-discovery of, I've got to figure out why I'm here, what I need to learn, and how I'm going to use it. And I didn't get any guidance from my manager as to why.
It's that big question of buy-in, right? If participants leave a session and no one asks them about it, no one invites them to try the skills that they talked about or create space for practice, it doesn't turn into behavior, and it certainly won't turn into habit. So kind of to sum up, like the most successful training initiatives that I've been involved in are really the ones where the leaders and the team members reinforce the learning. They ask about it in one-on-ones, meetings, create top opportunities for people to experiment and reflect and fail, right? Because you're not going to get it right the first time. So there's a little bit of an iterative scaffolding that has to happen. So that's when I've seen learning move from something interesting to something integrated. And that's always super fantastic to be a part of that, knowing that, you know, I contributed in a small way to usually the lessening of feeling of overwhelm or stress or burnout, right? Because those are the concerns that people have. So we're just really trying to get them to be more efficient in the work that they do. So that integration and impact is really important.
Now, maybe this addresses the next question that we had, which was really around linking things in the classroom to build connections for people. By the way, I love the fact that now Kandis Neth installs mind scaffolding that drives learning and outcomes. I love that. Now you're in the scaffolding of the mind business. Let's think about that. I'm great at ideas that really aren't that viable, but you know, and I just let them roll out like gumballs. There'll be another one in a minute.
That's amazing.
Now, so what other links? Maybe was really our last sort of question. Then we can just see if there's something else that you want to share. But how do you or organizations do a better job of linking the stuff going in the classroom with what is happening outside the classroom?
Well, I think it's really a summary of some of the points that we talked about already. You know, learning the new ideas is actually the easy part. It's like I mentioned, unlearning the old habits, building new ways of working is much harder. So in a workshop, you know, and a facilitated learning session, people often understand concepts really quickly. It makes sense. They may even agree with it, but performance doesn't change because understanding isn't the same as unlearning. You know, unlearning requires that awareness, that practice, that feedback, the time, and it requires yourself or others noticing that this is my default pattern and intentionally trying something different. And this doesn't just happen in a classroom. So learning that only impacts, you know, performance when the environment allows people to try, reflect, adjust. If someone leaves a workshop and returns to that urgency, pressure, overwhelm, old expectations, their brain goes back to familiar habits, not because they don't care, but because habits are efficient. And what we're trying to do in the training is suggest that they interrupt that system of pattern that we're so used to. So to answer your question, the real link between classroom and performance is what happens after. Right. Like I said, I'd love to be the star of the show, but they have to do the hard work with the information. And I often say that as facilitators and myself, I'm a curator of best practice and information. And I can't create that space for them to experiment outside of the workshop, which is why I try to do as much of I can in the time that we have together for them to apply and experiment and do some deeper thinking. If the leaders aren't asking about it, if they don't get to reflect on what worked and what didn't, they won't see new behavior. But if they do, that's where the learning turns into new behavior. And you see the payoffs and the ROI of the training indirectly, which is always very hard to measure in our business.
Yeah, for sure. So the project that Kandis and I are collaborating on right now, we're using demonstrated behavior assessments or inventories so that we can see what people think and even what their employees think. But we're also doing application reinforcement videos. We're encouraging check-in conversations with the managers. We're doing everything that we can, Kandis, right, to see if we can can get people doing something different. And even then, we still have to trust in the process. And the other thing I'd say, because if you're an operations leader who's listening in on this episode and it's really not, at least in your mind, about accelerating operational performance, I just want you to think that many times when you're accelerating operational performance, you are relying on a change in behavior, some of which may be supported with training and development. Other things could be just other interactions that you have with your people. But what I'm noticing, Kandis, is as organizations are more and more overwhelmed with change and competitive pressures and new technologies, is they're probably not realizing that they're putting the organization under cognitive load, that the organization is trying to revert back to its old behaviors, and that's not necessarily going to work. So I think all the things that we do for leadership development is really high value. Was there anything else? I know we covered a lot of ground today. Was there anything else that you wanted to share before we wrap up?
I'm very happy to have this conversation with you, Greg. As you can see, I'm very passionate about the work that we do, and I like to create these experiences that are worthy of people's time and have impact in ways that I may never get to see, but I trust the process, and I'm truly grateful to be a small part of their learning journey and also part of the environments that you're creating for those frontline leaders, right? They often are the ones that are left behind because people don't invest in them. So being a part of that investment in their development, whether they choose to take it on or not, really brings me joy, and I bring that joy to my work. So thank you for having me on the podcast today.
Thank you, Kandis. And again, if you want to reach Kandis Neth, if you want her to do frontline leadership, we'd like you, of course, to reach her through our website at uniquedevelopment.com. But Kandis also does other training and development, and her website is r3k consulting.ca. Thank you for giving your time as a listener to the episode. Here's the thing about podcasts is there's so many of them, and so many of them are celebrity driven, and I totally get it. It's probably hard to dedicate, some of your attention span to growth and development. So thank you for doing that. If you do come across an episode that you think is helpful to someone, the best thing you can do to spread the word is just to, usually there's a share button as you're listening to the episode, or to copy the link and send it. And of course, if anyone would actually take the extra time to post a little review and rate the podcast, that helps it be discovered by other people. And if there's anything that we can do to help you on your leadership journey, either as an organization or as an individual, be sure to reach out to us at uniquedevelopment.com.